Thank you. Good evening. So I'm going to talk a little bit with you about my experience and why I believe that this is a good place for me to be for next year and the years to come. I've prepared a bit of a statement that I'm hoping will shed some light for you about my ethos and my philosophy on teaching and learning and the principalship. It is not my resume, so I'm not going to bore you with the details of this, that, and the other thing, but it does speak to what has called me to being an educational leader, and I hope that it provides you some background and information about me as a leader. Schools should be communities of joyful learning. This ethos has guided me on a path as a learner, a teacher, a district leader, and a school administrator. As a beginning teacher, I noticed the affect, with an A, of students coming into my classes that were either already engaged and ready to learn or not quite there yet. I learned how to differentiate my instruction to make sure that all of my students left my classroom ready to learn for the rest of the day. But I noticed something very interesting. The more effective I became, the less coaching and feedback I received. So I began to wonder a couple of questions throughout my teaching career. What practices were supporting students' emotional growth as well as their academic growth? And why weren't we focused as a school on developing the capacity of both students and teachers for academic and emotional success? This is what propelled me into the school leadership program at Harvard. And following that program, I was fortunate to remain where I interned at the Timilty in Boston, which had seen some dramatic changes in their population, as well as a decline in enrollment. So I knew we needed a concrete focus on student learning and the barriers to student success. We began to use formative data to determine the effectiveness of what we were doing and to start having the agency for teachers to try different things, knowing that we probably would not get it right the first time. And it was an iterative process that needed to be repeated so we would get it right for kids. We were modeling what we expected our students to do and to show perseverance. We addressed the socio-emotional needs of students as we planned our lessons, and that we saw improved student outcomes, attendance, and overall health of the building. I took this learning with me as I led teacher teams at Boston Latin Academy and at Snowden International High School, as I implemented district-wide professional development opportunities for teachers in the entire Boston public school system, and in my current role as the acting principal of the Edwards Middle School. Beyond student growth as measured by formative and summative assessments, I've demonstrated the ability to lead teachers in meaningful professional learning and coaching that improves teacher practice and student outcomes. With the addition of implementing student behavioral interventions based on collaborative problem solving and restorative justice practices, and developing successful community outreach strategies, several things have remained consistent from my years of listening and leading change. Leadership of the principal and the leadership of the entire administration has a dramatic impact towards ensuring that joyful school environment that I believe so deeply in. Students and teachers generally want the same things in a learning environment: agency, clear expectations, and support. A few key elements of my leadership style have made me this effective leader. Primarily, I set meaningful and manageable goals with a clear vision of rigorous instruction for all students, and all means all. Additionally, and along with these high expectations, I provide a support that's appropriate to teachers according to the skill and will of where they are in learning their craft. Finally, I've honed the ability to identify and address any direct impact that my leadership and the decisions that we make as a school or as a community have on our families, our students, and our staff. Along with all of this, I've learned that clear communication is a must. I believe that these elements, along with my experience with supporting the growth of all learners in diverse populations, make me uniquely qualified to be here as your next leader at Milford, and I look forward to taking your questions.
So we have a pretty dynamic community here in Milford, and we have students that range in in abilities to students that need extra help, to students that, that are excelling and need extra challenges. How do you see dealing with this within, a strapped budget that, all schools are dealing with? And how do you see dealing with mandates of the state government and also being able to give opportunities for those students that are your really high achievers?
So this is something I've done already in my work in Boston Public Schools. Some of it is outreach to partnerships to support in filling gaps. It depends on where the students are. It comes from knowing our students and our learners and knowing what they need. So that takes a couple of things. One is student agency and input with voice. I think also parent voice, and then putting that together with teacher voice. So when you all come together and you have a clear understanding of each child, of where they need to go for their growth, and you find those opportunities and you develop them for them. I think all learners have to be challenged, and I think that, and I've led work already within Boston and in other communities about ensuring access and equity in rigorous content for all students, whether they're students that typically need what we would normally call intervention or they need extension activities. I've done this work already. We have an advisory period in my current building. It's actually something that I built out in a previous school as well. And that time frame is a place for socio-emotional support for students that need that first thing in the morning. And then there's also an opportunity for either intervention or extension, depending on what those students need. And it's fluid. So it may change 6 weeks from now. It may change 12 weeks from now. We're continuously taking the pulse of that to make sure that what we're doing for students is the right level of rigor and challenge. I think a lot of it comes from how we teach. It's not necessarily the materials we have, although those need to be high quality. It's what we're doing with them and how we're asking students to think about the content and think about the material that is that big difference there. And that's about planning. That's work I've led before. That's professional learning for teachers, coaching for the teachers, potentially some work with parent engagement so that you can support your learners at home, but keeping that open line of communication and understanding that we're all here to make sure that each child is appropriately challenged, and then it becomes my job to make sure that the delivery of instruction as well as any other surrounding programs are supporting the growth of that child. I think with state mandates and reduced funding, I'm no stranger to that given the Boston climate. We've learned to do more and more and more with less and less and less, and we've seen we've seen student efficacy and teacher efficacy improve under conditions where they didn't cost any money. So it's looking for those sort of strategies to make sure that we're engaging all learners. That's the first step.
Does anyone else have a question? Hi, so my question is about faculty and staff. How do you on a daily basis and then over the course of a year ensure faculty morale? Because often happy teachers, successful teachers translates to happy students, successful students.
I think a lot of that is celebrating the best practices. So the best example I can give is I came in only about 2 months ago into my current position. The principal was leaving for another assignment. The superintendent said, this culture, this climate, they need some support. They're feeling really anxious. I want you to go there and help. And I said, okay, well, superintendent, I go where you tell me to. So I went there, and the first thing that I did was I listened. So there was a lot of outreach. I was very visible in the school. I remain visible in a school. It's just my thing. And I made sure to keep open office hours to be before school, after school, outreach to teachers. If I hear something, I go talk to them. Building relationships is a big part of that. But one thing that I did stands out in my mind is that there's a weekly newsletter that I put out. And at my school, we're the Eagles, okay? So we're not the Scarlet Hawks, but we're the Eagles. And so I call it Eagle Sightings. And it's cute and it's a little kitsch, but as I'm going through my learning walks, I highlight best practices that I'm seeing in the building, and I've made sure that every classroom has had a highlight in the best practices. You go from that growth mindset of you're all doing something great. And I saw multiple classrooms today, and there are tremendous good practices that are happening here, But I don't know that if you're not sharing that with one another, then you could teach across from the hall from somebody for years and never know anything about them or their teaching. So that it's really celebrating those best practices and building relationships.
What would be a few of your top priorities transitioning into Milford High School?
So I think piggybacking on that last question is building those relationships and understanding the historical context. I know the school, we've talked earlier today about some of the changes the school has undergone. I think that leveraging and thinking about level 3 status and really moving the school to level 1 is an important priority for me to just keep as a focus in the back of my mind, thinking about the work that you have done over the last several years and the interventions that we spoke about earlier today, and hopefully that will make it a non-issue, but it's still in that back of my mind of this school. What I saw today is not reflective of what I see on a public website. So we want to make sure that the great practices that are happening here are reflected in our more public data. I think that's important because that can be a deterrent or not for people to choose Milford High for their child's experience. So it would be, I think the top 2 would be looking at that data a little bit more, and then also building the relationships and the context. I think from there, I would probably build out a shorter and longer term plan for an entry, but those 2 pieces are going to frame that for me to know where do we need to go, what do we need to do. One thing that I can assure you of is that in September, I will be in every classroom. There will not be a teacher that's not visited by me in September. Not necessarily evaluative, but definitely a check-in so I can take the instructional pulse of the building.
What do you think are some things that a principal needs to do in order to create a positive school culture?
There's 2 things. One, celebrating the positive. We need to focus on what we're doing well and blossom that out. And then the other piece is open and honest communication. What I found with cognitive dissonance that with some schools that I've worked with where there's some tension between administration and staff is when we're feeling like we're not all on the same side. We're all on the same side. We're on the same side of the kids. It's about the students and their learning, and we need to focus on that. So when you keep kids in the center of what your work is, and then we're talking about building a climate around the student, it becomes less about the adults and more about how do we move students and how do we make sure that students are exhibiting growth. So that open line of communication where people can come in and say, you know, you said this and I really didn't like it. Okay, let's unpack that. Let's talk about it. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's figure that out. And having that building that trust is really important. And when you say something, you have to follow through on it. End of story.
Any other? What do you see as some of high school students' biggest challenges these days, and what is the responsibility of the whole school culture in help?
That's a great question. I think there are 2 major challenges that weigh on my mind when thinking about high school and any sort of redesign thinking that we need to be doing right now across the nation. One is that college is becoming increasingly unaffordable. So we need to be thinking about building pathways for students either to have early college admission, dual enrollment. Dr. McIntyre and I were talking about this earlier, building those pathways to either offset the cost or create the conditions where scholarships are more readily available for our students. Then on the other side of that, we're preparing students for a world that we know mostly nothing about. So 10 years ago, there were no computers in our pockets, and we didn't have this ready access. So where our freshmen are right now, when they graduate from college, the world is going to look totally different. So we have to focus on that critical skills and the critical thinking piece that will help them to be consumers of information, to be able to be collaborative, to be able to use technology appropriately, and to build those sort of softer set of skills alongside the content standards so that they are ready for anything that this world throws at them. So I think those are the 2 big challenges right now.
How do you see yourself balancing the pressure from...
I'm sorry, if I may, so they could hear.
Yeah. How do you see yourself balancing the pressure of the government on students to do well MCAS and whatnot, standardized testing, and making sure that the students are indeed getting what they need from the school, and just trying to push those sorts of things through.
So in my experience, and I had a lot of success with this at Latin Academy, when you have good teaching practices and you focus on student engagement and student-centered practices where you're putting the child at the focus, the scores come. So this was my experience, and that demographic academically is very similar to the demographic here. It is an exam school, but it's an exam school in a highly urban setting. So when you're looking at the academic rainbow of students, it's very, very similar. And what we did was really focus on our students that could pretty easily move from needs improvement to proficient. And what happened was, by focusing on the practices that move those students up, it moved the whole class up. So it moved our proficient students into advanced, our needs improvement students into proficient, and our warning students, most of them into needs improvement, and most of our low needs improvement to either high needs improvement or proficient. So I'm not a teach to the test person. We know what the high power standards are. These have not been really changed over the last 17, 18 years. So we know where kids fail. We know number sense is a problem. We know fractions are a problem. We know these things. So we need to address them, but address them in a way that engages the student in learning and doesn't shut them off.
How do you see your presence among the student body? Do you see yourself sort of overseeing the school from a higher level, even or face-to-face with the students, seeing yourself at all the events? There are times when I think that Ms. Bannock lives here and has a bed somewhere because she's always here.
Yeah, that's kind of the perception of my school now. It's an extended day school. We start at 7:10. The teachers have their core day until 2:10, but the kids stay until 4:10. I'm there usually around 6 a.m., and if we don't have a meet or a game or some other event, I'm usually there until 6 p.m. So I'm highly visible and I'm on the ground. It can be unsettling at times, but I don't think that would be a change from the current leadership. So I see myself in and among on the ground level. I've done the central office work. I have no desire to do that work, if ever, again. And the reason I came back to schools was because I missed being with the kids and the teachers and the families. So my general working philosophy is, if this is something I can do when the kids aren't here, I'm going to do it when the kids aren't here. And I'm out in classrooms, I'm out in the lunchroom, I'm before school, after school, games, whatnot. It's part of the community, and as the principal, I need to be leading the community. That's what that means to me.
To piggyback on that a little bit, how would you involve the students in decision making?
I was asked this question about 2 hours ago. So there are multiple different ways that you can involve students in decision making. There's sort of a two-part component. One is that I feel very strongly that whenever you meet with students or you meet with a group of people to make a decision, that you're really making the decision. You're not coming in knowing what you want the outcome to be, but it's truly a collaboratively defined decision in those instances where that's appropriate. And I think that students can have a lot of agency in how their school is run, how the school works, really working on student government. I'm not sure if you have a student mediation program here. That would be great to build or to build upon. One of the students I was walking around with today, it has been in the country for 2 years, and I thought, wouldn't it be great if, as that population bubbles up into the high school, that we create a group around that there's some sort of level of support for students to have a two-way communication with the administration about how is this going, this is a change, what are we seeing, what can we adjust? And I see that happening throughout the school, either within student government or your school site council, whatever those structures already look like, and then building on that from above there. I would keep my door open the same way I do now and the same way I would for teachers, for students to come in. And there are students that I know that I hear on the radio so-and-so is having an iffy day. I know I have to go find that student and just say, hey, how you doing? You having an okay day? And that'll just calm them down. So I think there's that same level of communication and openness that the students deserve, because they're just as much a part of this learning community as the adults.
So you met with a lot of students and faculty and staff today. Can you talk a little bit about what you learned about Milford High School and what you were impressed with and areas that you see that you could build upon?
So first of all, what was unique about this opportunity for me is I was actually at a conference last week. So at my first interview, it was a Skype interview. So people were like, that big on the screen. So coming here today, I was able to get a better feel of the building, the physical environment. The students were amazing. Everyone that I talked to had such high praise, and they also were able to clearly articulate where they think the school needs to grow. And that was pretty consistent with everybody whom I met with today, that there's a deep love and care for what we do here, and there's an understanding that we're here for the right reasons. And that next piece is, but I think we could do this better. And I think that's just a great foundation and a mindset that I'm really excited to work with. I think one of the pieces that we may want to think about is really amping up the critical thinking skills across all of the classes. I saw in one classroom, students were had total autonomy of their work. And the teacher had posted something on Google Classroom, and it was like, go forth and prosper, you're good. And then in another classroom, I saw complete direct instruction with limited student engagement. So that's a very wide path, and we want to move more towards that path. We want to move more towards student-centered instruction of thinking about how do we engage students. There's a time for direct instruction, and there's a time for collaboration, and there's a time for neither. But thinking about how do we grow those practices here, because it's those critical thinking skills that are the make or break often between that needs improvement and proficient. At least in my experience working with students of this age group, it's that piece, that one little link, that ramping up the rigor in all of your classes. And it doesn't mean that Johnny gets 10 questions and Susie gets 20. It's we all do 10. Yours might be a little bit more complex, and yours over here you might have a template or some other scaffold, but we're all doing the same questions and making sure that there's equity in that work.
With the increase in mental health illness among adolescents, can you speak to your experience and maybe some specific examples of working either with guidance or some kind of bridge program like out of Brookline, and just speak a little bit about that? Thank you.
Sure. So the easiest way for me to talk about this is to be reflective of when I was a disciplinarian. So not as an instructional leader, but when I had a component of my position that was sort of in between the two. And in those instances, I truly believe that students don't behave the way we don't want them to because they want to. Students behave in ways we don't want them to because they don't have the skills or there's something else, that socio-emotional piece. And we have to get to the bottom of that before we're going to see any sort of behavioral change. So I've worked with a lot of clinicians and hospitals and bringing people in. It kind of goes back to the first question about partnerships and making sure that we're building those pathways, but also building the opportunities for teachers to talk about what works for that student, because what works in my classroom might not work in somebody else's classroom, and thinking about, well, how are you engaging this child because I'm really struggling? And that's how I would support guidance, and we talked about that a little bit earlier today about having that deep dive into if there's something that's concerning, what is it, why is it, and matching the right support to that student. And sometimes all that needs to be is that student has someone to go to when they're feeling a certain way. And that might be a different person for every kid. It might not be their guidance counselor. It might be someone else in the building. And working that out, I've had experiences with that with my own kids at Latin Academy, because the kids that I suspended the most I very quickly realized they didn't have a home. They didn't have a place. They maybe didn't even have a physical home. There were other things that were getting in the way, and they weren't coming to school ready to learn. So we would work out different things. One piece is that one child had a situation at home where they just need to get out of the house as soon as possible. So I'm an early bird. They came in, they would sit in my office, do homework. When they were done with homework, they could help me with certain things. And so that was what helped that child get ready for the day. Also, some other students that were disciplined for behaviors in the classroom who didn't feel like a valued member of our school community ended up becoming my tech advisors, or they ended up becoming supports for other things. So finding roles and responsibilities so students feel like valued members of the community, even if there's other things outside that devalue them as humans, of making sure that when they're here, they feel valued.
Okay, so actually my question kind of ties in a little bit to what you were just talking about. A lot of students I feel graduate from high school not really prepared for the world that's rushing at them like a freight train. No idea what taxes are all about, no idea, what the political parties are all about and who's who and what's what. What kind of programs would you put in place to address some of these?
I don't know if that's programs or curriculum. So the things that you mentioned to me marry very easily into making sure that we're tying in and adapting our curriculum every year as we go forward to make sure that it's most culturally relevant. So I think it's part of the work that I would do with the teacher leaders, and making sure that in the content areas that we're finding ways to address the political climate, the taxes piece. So there are natural places within the core content where that could be introduced. I think the challenge in that is that that's the flip side of choice, right? So if you know that not all kids take exactly the same classes, we have to be unified as each content area, that we're not gonna teach just about the tax structure in econ, or an AP. We're gonna teach it to all of our classes, and this is how we're gonna break it down in all of the classes. So thinking about it that way would be something that's how I would go about it, if that helps answer your question.
Maddie.
Yay, a student question.
So what's your opinion on the place of technology in a learning environment?
That's a great question. So I was the director of technology at Latin Academy. That's where I started before my role got larger and larger and larger. So I'm going to ask you a follow-up question. Are you talking about instructional technology, or are you talking about using cell phones? Okay, because there's a difference, and sometimes we don't use them the same way. So instructional technology goes back to a little bit about what I said before about preparing y'all for a world that we don't know yet, and I wasn't brought up. There was no internet when I was in college. Like, it just didn't exist. Probably existed, but I didn't have it. So we have to make sure that as educators, we're using technology to enhance what we're doing. I don't think that using technology to substitute pen and paper is the right thing, because then all you're doing is taking one thing and substituting it with another thing. So a great example is Google Docs, right? So you all use Google Docs here, or many of you use Google Docs, many of you use Google Classroom. So just having you write your papers on a Google Doc and sharing it with your teacher is really not any different than writing it down and handing it in, except you're saving paper, right? But if you turn that into an opportunity to collaborate throughout the writing process, either with your teacher, with a peer writer, with other people, then you're starting to build the skills that the technology and innovation economy are going to ask of you, because we already know that that's what they're asking of people. I read an article yesterday or the day before about how this open concept offices are now becoming passé, because people are working from home, people are working in remote locations, people don't live where they work. So we have to prepare that sort of instructional use. I think that also we have to remember that, like me, when I was first teaching, if an overhead was the little plastic thing that you stuck on, so it wasn't a smart board. or something super amazing with all of these bells and whistles, and to understand that teachers need to learn at their own pace also. So I would never say all teachers need to use X, because if I were a teacher that wasn't comfortable with that, it would be really anxiety producing for me. But the flip side of that is, let's see how. How are you comfortable? Let me coach you in, right? And looking at how we're developing those technology skills in teachers while we're developing your skills for the world beyond high school.
Thank you very much. And at this time, we are going to have Ms. Doherty move on to her next
you.
station, which
Thank
will be
you.
in C8. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all for coming out. I know that time with our families in the evening especially is really valued, and so I appreciate you coming to learn more and get to meet your future principal. It says a lot about this community and just, you know, how engaged you are. So thank you. So I've been an educator for 13 years now. I didn't initially think that that was my direction in life. I was born in Puerto Rico, and my mom's family is from Venezuela. And when I entered college, there was a lot of political change going on in Venezuela, and I wanted to know why and what was going on. So I studied international relations. And when I got out of college, I went to a language school in Mexico. I started pursuing a master's degree in public affairs and international relations. And at the same time, I was working on keeping my Spanish up to a professional level. So I started volunteering in Lawrence, Massachusetts. And that experience at a youth center then led to a job at a high school in Lawrence. And I was hooked. That was it. I knew that I wanted to work with young people. I wanted to be an educator, and that this was my calling in life. So I haven't looked back, and I've had the honor and the privilege to work with students in Lawrence at that private school. After that, my wife was accepted to law school down in Washington, D.C. We made the move down to Washington, D.C. I was an assistant principal and principal of both high school and a middle school down in Washington, D.C. Our middle school started off as down there it's called a Tier 2 school. I was proud to bring it up to a Tier 1 level when I was the principal. And we had a child, and that really drew us back to our extended family here in Massachusetts. So we made the move back, and you know, I think what's really drawn me to Milford is one, it's a very diverse school district, and that diversity has always been something I've been committed to, back from when I worked in Lawrence to Washington, D.C. I think the second reason is at some of the schools where we worked before, there wasn't really kind of comprehensive programming. What I mean by that is I would have parents come to me and they would say, I love your school. I want my child to go there. I know he's going to get a great education, but he's also into football, and he loves playing his trumpet, and he also, you know, likes art. And a lot of times I'd have to say, well, I'm sorry, we don't offer that. And as soon as I started learning about Milford and today, especially, getting to see just all the different programming, all the different opportunities. I mean, it's like walking into a college campus. So I think that's been really impressive and something that drew me here. And really the last reason is that, again, at times in some of the charter schools I worked, there wasn't the sense that the school was the hub of the community. You know, it was a school that was doing well for the community, but it didn't bring people together in the way that I've seen here. I had a little bit of time after, you know, one of my meetings today, and I just went out to go look at the girls' softball game, and I think it was an hour before the game was started, and there was already parents lining up to watch that game. You know, and then I've talked with students and with teachers here about the generations of kids and parents and grandparents who who have gone here, and that says a lot about the culture and about this school and what it means to this community, and that's something that I'm really looking forward to and something that I'm seeking in my next job. So I'd love to open it up to questions now. Anything you want to know, please ask.
I see that you're currently a principal in Lynn, so why leave Lynn and come here?
Well, actually, I want to make a little bit of a correction to that. So I was a principal in Lynn. I decided to take this last year off. I have a little girl, and I really wanted to be able to spend some more time with her and raising her. We got her into a school. We moved to Malden, Massachusetts. We got her into a school there that had a spot for her 3 days a week, but we needed somebody to look after her 2 more days a week. We also bought an old home that needed a lot of renovation. So I really spent this last year getting our family settled into that community and getting to raise my daughter. And it's given me a lot of perspective on what it means to be a parent. And I think it helps me develop a lot of empathy for parents when they're sitting across the table from me when I'm a principal and they're upset. I can now picture myself, right, in that seat. So that's a little bit about what I've been up to. Lynn was a wonderful place, but like I said in my last response, I wanted a school that had the type of comprehensive programming that could offer any kid what they needed and wanted, and I see that here. And I also wanted a school that really was at the center of the community, and that was a community-oriented school, and I see that here as well. So that's why I'm here. You're welcome.
So I'm going to ask you sort of the same question on how do you see dealing with the diversity of things that you have to do with kids that are need extra help with education, but also being able to challenge your high excelling kids and being able to give them the opportunities to do challenging things as well?
Yeah, it's a great question. Because as a principal, we have students on all ends of the spectrum, right, who need a lot of really intensive support. Maybe it's because they've just moved to this country and they're still learning the language. But we also have students who need to be in AP classes and whose goal it is to get into an Ivy League college. There's a lot in place already here for, I think, all of those students. There's AP courses offered as soon as a student's a 9th grader here. And there's also robust supports in place for our English learners. The way I've done that in the past is made sure that we had strong structures in place. We had staff, we had classes, we had scheduling that supported our students who needed the most support. But we also had teachers who knew how to extend the curriculum beyond kind of the normal level. And what I mean by that is, who recognize who are the students in their class who need an extra push. They know their content well enough, they're experts in the math and the science that they're teaching, that they know how to push it and really challenge those students who need the biggest challenge. And then, like I said, it's also about what are the course offerings. Do we have AP courses? Do we have robotics programs? Do we have opportunities for students to go and take college level courses? And it's really refreshing to see that Milford is offering those types of opportunities. So I think that's how I would do it. That's how I have, and that's what I've seen here as well. So did that answer your question? Great.
How do you support your faculty and staff regarding morale, both on a daily basis and then over a long-term basis?
I would say teaching is the second hardest job. Parenting is probably the first, and teaching is probably the second hardest job in the world. And so, it's tough, and doing this day in and day out does require a lot of kind of love and attention. So I think morale comes from helping people see their strengths and their successes, making sure that they feel recognized. You know, when teachers are getting kids into Ivy League schools, like we're seeing here, they should know what it is about their work that's contributed to that, so that they hold on to those successes even in the most challenging moments, and they say, you know what, if I work hard, I'll keep seeing that. I think over the long term, people need to feel that they're growing. They need to feel that they're getting better and better and better at what they do. I think a lot of folks, you know, when they feel as if they're just plateauing, that's when they start to get burnt out and lose interest in what they're doing. So, you know, it means that you need to have good leadership in place. You need to have people that are supporting those teachers in the right ways depending on their level. You know, so if you've had a teacher who's been here and is really doing well, you know, what's the next step for them? You know, and so having a leadership team that knows their teachers and knows how to keep them growing and feeling successful is how I would support them over the long term. Yeah, you're welcome.
What do you
There's
think?
a question in the back. Of course.
So what's your perspective on the importance and the recognition of special ed students in our school system, and also the extracurricular things that come with that, like unified sports and Special Olympics?
Mm-hmm. From what I've seen at the school, it's really one of the strengths. I mean, all the cooperative programs that are in place really speak to, I think, you know, the sense of inclusion, and that nobody is made to feel as if they are being pushed aside or diminished in any way. So, I mean, my perspective is that everyone here should feel valued. Everyone here should feel like they have a place. Everyone here should feel like they have friends around them. I was very impressed when there was a student who I was talking to actually here in this library, and you know, I was just walking around and getting to know some people, and I asked them, you know, so what's good about Milford? And the first thing he said to me, he goes, the Pathways program. He goes, I used to be in it. It had a lot of great teachers, and they helped me transition out. And I stopped and I thought, wow, so here's a student who feels no stigma in sharing that with an outsider. And here's a student who's also now transitioned out, so that speaks to the success of the program. So I think that was a real telling moment for me here, and something I'd like to be able to support, that students don't feel any type of stigma if they are in a program to meet their needs. And I think all the ways that we are, you know, developing cooperative programming that has, you know, that has students engaged in sports, clubs, you know, regardless of what their needs are. Did that answer your question? Great.
As we've seen over the years, not just here, but in a lot of places where funding is a big issue.
Yeah.
And a lot of times the first programs to get cut are visual and performing arts programs, but a lot of times over sports programs. What is your position on supporting the performing arts and visual arts? Because here, there are a lot of kids in those programs. Yeah. So that's a really, really important part of this school system.
Yeah, those programs are ones that I've fought really hard to get established in some of the previous schools where I've worked, where there was no programming and no funding. And before like for example in Lynn, my middle school students did not have art classes or music classes. One of the last things I did there before I left was hire a music director, hire an art director, hire art teachers, hire music teachers. It's been a priority for me when there was nothing. So now that I have the opportunity to walk into a school where there is a really robust set of programming, I'm going to really work hard to safeguard it. It's, I was an art major in high school, meaning I got to take like a double block of art, and it met first thing in the morning. I was really into ceramics and pottery. It's what brought me to school a lot of days. And it's where I felt successful, and it's where it was a nice outlet for me. It meant a lot to me personally, and I know that my friends and I know the students I've had in the past, I've also felt the same way, that, you know, it's that art class, it's that music class that really does draw them and keeps them feeling successful, feeling good, feeling like themselves, and I would never want to take that away.
Hello, I apologize for coming in late. My name is Harold Rhodes, proud daughter, graduate 2006 from Milford High School with her master's degree from Columbia.
Congratulations.
So we are very proud of our school here in Milford. I have a question, and it's a very difficult question, and it has been one that I've been asking the school committee and others consistently. So I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
Please.
Our school, Hopedale, is rated a level 1 by the report card. Medway is rated a level 1. Blackstone Valley is rated a level 1. Tri-County is rated a level 1. Milford is rated a level 3. All right. Those are the facts.
Yep.
The question is, if you were to become principal next year, how long before Milford would become a level 1 school?
So thank you for asking the question. It's important. And like you said, the data speaks for itself, and it's clear. It's part of the research that I did coming in here. You know, as I've had a chance to meet with the leadership team, I've heard of some initiatives that I think are going to quickly move Milford from level 3 to level 2 and even level 1. Some of the things that I've heard that I think I would support and would continue are math remediation program for students who need a little extra preparation and time before taking their MCAS math. I think also that there's opportunities for our English language learners. There's a lot of growth that those students could be making. And those are two areas that I would focus on if I was to be the principal that would help bring us from, like I said, level 3 to level 2 and to level 1.
I appreciate you being well aware of the programs that are going on to improve it. What I've been unable is to find anyone willing to provide a commitment to say, if we do all these things, will Milford improve and when? I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
So can you talk a little bit about what do you think are the essential qualities that a high school principal must have in order to be successful for the students?
Yeah. So I think one of the most important essential qualities is it needs to be someone who is collaborative. It is a large school with a large number of staff, large amount of programming going on. You cannot see yourself as the one who is going to lead each and every initiative. So you need to have a strong team around you. You need to be able to hear their ideas and build off of their leadership qualities. So I think that's one of the most important. Two is you need to be somebody who is competent and capable of leading instructional change and improvement so that teachers are, like I said previously when asked how to support teachers, so that teachers always feel that they are getting better and growing in their practice. And again, that needs to come from your own knowledge and confidence in how to improve teaching and learning. I think another essential quality is that you need to be someone who is a good listener and able to sit down with people from all different backgrounds, especially in a school district like this where we have a diverse student body. And I think some of my experiences, whether it be from internships in rural areas in Venezuela, where I'm sitting on a dirt floor with farmers, hearing about water resources, to going out and seeking internships for students at Bank of America and meeting with a CEO, have prepared me to be able to, again, be a good listener, and understand where people are coming from, regardless of their background. So I think those are three essential characteristics. Yeah.
So the current leadership is very involved with like the student events, and we know that Miss Paddock is always at like all the concerts and the sports stuff. Do you see yourself doing that as well?
I think it's one of the joys of this job, and sometimes doesn't feel like work. Like, for example, even just today, I had a little bit of time off after one of my interviews, and I took a walk out to the softball field and was watching the girls warming up for their game, and it's just it's a wonderful way to spend some time. It's also just a great way to get to know your students in different ways. You see them in the classroom, you see them coming in and out of school, but to see them as athletes or artists or dancers or just having fun really helps you get to know them. And so I see that as the fun and kind of a lot of the joy in this work is getting to go to dances and getting to watch sports competitions, and even getting to get really involved. At the middle school I was at in Washington, D.C., I helped start the wrestling team there. There wasn't one previously, and getting to go out for practices and roll around. I mean, it's what makes this job a lot of fun at times when it can be stressful even. Yeah.
What do you see as some of the challenges that high school students face today, and how or what is the role of the school in helping students, make it through those challenges?
Yeah. I think it's much more difficult to be a teenager and a high school student now than it used to be. Whether it be the role of social media and how quickly, a student can be bullied or, just really be disparaged, is a big challenge. So I think for that specifically, I've led initiatives at other schools around, just helping students understand like what is bullying, what are safe ways to use their devices, helping parents also to better monitor and understand, the technology that their kids are using. I think it's one of our greatest developments as a society, but it's also one of the most dangerous things that our kids encounter on a day-to-day basis. So I think there's a lot of teaching that needs to happen there. I think one of the other big challenges is, this pressure that students feel to getting into, a top-tier school, and that can be overwhelming at times for some students. And so helping them really figure out what is the best fit, and not just to, have a school as a goal because of the name or what you think comes with it. And really starting to see, what type of school environment it is, what type of programming they have, and match that up with what they're looking for. So that's a lot of work to do with the guidance department, especially. And again, at the high school I worked in Washington, D.C., we, especially given kind of our diverse student body there, spent a lot of time helping them understand, what schools they were applying to. Did those colleges and universities have programs in place that have supported that type of kid before? And then, there's also then the rising cost of higher education, and helping parents understand, and students, what goes into this decision financially. What do different financial aid packages really mean over the course of years? And just helping folks navigate that, I think, is one of the big challenges, so that they don't end up with a large amount of debt and no degree. Yeah.
Of all our surrounding schools, we are by far the largest and the most diverse school community, which is truly our greatest strength.
I agree.
With that, though, we're very inclusive. We keep all of our alternative programs in the school, as opposed to some communities that have their alternative programs outside of the school. When you have a special ed program outside the school, then those test scores do not factor into your school's test scores. So we are all committed to the diversity in our school community and keeping our Pathways program that you've referred to and our Transitions program and our EL students in the school and not placing them in different programs outside of the school in order to impact test scores. We, as a level 3 school, are the only school in this area that have students going to Harvard, Princeton, and Yale. So I think about test scores as a measure of student achievement. Interestingly, the colleges and universities are moving away from the SAT and the ACT every year. There's more and more colleges and universities moving over to fairtest.org saying we no longer require SATs and ACTs. So can you talk about, in addition to test scores, what else is a measure of high school success?
Yeah. So clearly your 4-year transcript is a big measure of success. How did you perform in the classes that you were enrolled in is huge, and that's one of the main factors that colleges and universities are going to be looking at. I think one of the other big measures is what have you done outside of the classroom? In what ways, and colleges are looking for, in what ways have you shown leadership outside of the classroom specifically? You know, what clubs, what activities, what sports were you involved in, and in what way were you a leadership? What way were you a leader in those activities? And so that needs to come through in students' you know, essays and their interviews with college admissions counselors. So I think that's a big measure. And I would also say that, you know, you're right, that SAT and ACT scores are on the decline in terms of their importance for schools. And while, yes, they're one measure, it you know, it is something, it's only a part of the pie. And really more importantly is how are students performing on their 4-year transcript, and also in terms of their extracurriculars, and what ways are they showing leadership. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is like a follow-up to her question.
Yeah.
Aside, like completely aside from college acceptance, how would you consider to measure the success of a school? Completely aside from what colleges your student get accepted to.
Great question. Are students saying, you know, in surveys, in, you know, informal interviews, are they seeing themselves as a part and having a voice in the school? I think if a school is not student-centered and students just feel like this is a place that they come and things happen to them, then I'm not successful. They need to feel a level of ownership, of leadership, that this is their school. That's how, one of the ways I would measure success in the 1 minute I have. All right, great. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you
I really
very
appreciate
much.
it.
Thank you. Thank you for coming out tonight, and thank you for being engaged in this school and being active participants in making this school the best it can be. You obviously, whether you are watching on TV or whether you are here, you're present because you know that the principle matters in terms of what happens in a school, and I appreciate the fact that you recognize that and that you are invested in the process. My name is Josh Outland. As Principal Banach was saying, I currently work up at Hudson High School. I've been there since 2001. I worked as a classroom teacher for 8 years, and I've worked as an assistant principal for 8 years. I love working in public education. I have done so since the fall when I graduated from Middlebury College. I worked for 1 year at Longmeadow High School in Western Mass, and then I came back here, and I've been in Hudson ever since. I honestly believe that there are few things as important as our public schools, and I feel very privileged to work to make our public schools the best they can be. I'm passionate about it, and I'm ready to work very, very hard in this community to help make this school the very best it can be. I want to share with you sort of 3 reasons why I want to be here, and then I'd love to take your questions. So I want to be here because this is a school and a community to which I can make the commitment. The principal's job, as Ms. Banach knows, is a big job. And as an assistant principal for 8 years, I feel like I come into this with my eyes wide open. It is a huge commitment and responsibility to be a principal. It takes a tremendous amount of time and energy. I am married. I have 3 young children. I want to stay married. I want to be a good father. And to be able to be a good principal and a good husband and a good father is hard to do. And I think the only way you can do it is when you live close to the school. And I live less than 2 miles from this school. And that gives me confidence that while there will be some sacrifices for my family, there's no doubt about that, that I can make the commitment to you to put in the time and the energy required to be the principal that this school deserves. I graduated from this school. My wife graduated from this school. Our family's all here. I'm not going anywhere. And so not only can I commit to putting in the hours, I can commit to putting in the years. Building positive change in schools does not happen overnight. This is a long haul game. And I'm ready to make the commitment to play the long game. And I feel like I can look in that and say that because my family's all here. And I'm not going anywhere, and I live less than 2 miles from this school. The second and third reasons why I want to be here is that this community is very compelling for a number of reasons that I want to share with you, and this school is very compelling to me for a number of reasons I want to share with you. Let me start with the community. Milford is one of a handful of communities that is truly diverse. So typically when we talk about, I think the label diversity is often misapplied to refer to schools that are actually quite homogenous. Diversity is often applied to schools that have high concentrations of low-income, non-white students. Well, but they're in fact not very diverse schools. They're quite homogenous. Milford is a truly diverse community, and this is a truly diverse school. And as someone who is committed to this project of public education, I want this school to be great because I live here, but I also want this school to be great because this country needs diverse high schools to be models of excellence. And the third reason is I want to be here is because I think that Milford is well on its way to becoming one of these diverse schools that is a model of excellence. So Milford has racked up a number of what I consider to be very distinctive gains and achievements in recent years. And by being here in this building over the course of the day and meeting students and teachers and administrators, I am convinced that there is some excellent work going on here in Milford and that the foundation is in place and the positive momentum is in place to continue this school's progression that is already on to becoming truly exemplary. And so for those 3 reasons, I want to be here and I want to do this. So thank you for coming out tonight, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you and trying to answer your questions as best as I can. The gentleman in the back.
Oh, I'll go back.
She knows my question. So I'm asking the same question to everyone. So basically, you know, we have a challenge that you have kids at the school that have a wide diversity of learning challenges. You have those kids that need a lot of extra help, that need to get there, and you also have kids that are excelling and need to be challenged.
Yep.
Quite often what's happened is the excelling kids have been sacrificed in the need to fit state mandates and stuff like that. How do you see yourself dealing with that, being able to deal with that broad range of teaching abilities that you need to provide or opportunities you need to provide within the schools?
Sure. Well, I'd say in terms of doing right by our students who excel, there's some things that, from what I've perceived, and I have a limited perspective, and I don't know what you know, and I haven't seen what you've seen. From what I've seen, there's some things going on here that excite me, and I think also point towards where things need to go in the future. So I'll share sort of 3 things that I've learned about this school that I think point to the right direction. Okay. So number 1 is the rate of AP participation in this school has climbed significantly and steadily for multiple years. And I think that for students who excel and for our work to promote college readiness, I believe that AP course taking is the right pathway for us to do so. Secondly, so actually, let me expand on that for a moment. Something that Milford's done that I'm very impressed with is Milford has expanded AP participation while the composition of the student body has become increasingly disadvantaged. And I think you'd be hard-pressed to find other schools who have that track record, and that impresses me as someone from the outside. Secondly, as I spoke, when I was touring the building this morning, I walked around with 2 sophomores, each of whom were telling me that they were taking their second advanced placement course because they had taken their first advanced placement course as a 9th grader. This is not the norm in high schools in the region, and I think that this is encouraging to me that this is a school that recognizes that we can have 9th graders be ready to be successful in the most rigorous courses. And I think that that's true. I think that we can have 9th graders be successful in our most rigorous courses. Third is I heard today that you have a small cohort of students who are completing Calc BC in their junior year, and that the school has had to develop courses beyond Calc BC for students to take in their senior year. This is also not the norm, and this is exciting to me. And I think that where that all sort of points to is that we need to continue to broaden our portfolio of advanced courses, some of which are AP, but not necessarily. There's other types of advanced coursework we can offer outside of advanced placement. But I think we need to consistently look to see how can we broaden our portfolio of advanced coursework for students. And how do we build the sort of teacher capacity to instruct at that level of advanced coursework? So one thing is, I'll just give you a couple quick thoughts and let me take some more questions. One up at Hudson where I've been, there's a new, College Board has rolled out a series of 2 new courses in recent years called AP Capstone. It's a 2-course sequence of AP Seminar and AP Research. It has not been rolled out on an open basis, but it's been done sort of in a 2-stage pilot. I learned about it after the first year. I wrote the application and applied for Hudson High School to be accepted for the second year. We've launched the AP Capstone program at Hudson High School this year. We've rolled out the first course. We're rolling out the second course next year. I'm not going to sort of get into the details of AP Capstone right now, but I think it is an outstanding and unique opportunity to promote excellence and to support sort of high-achieving students. And I think that there's a place for it in a school like Milford. And I've spoken for a while, so let me sort of pause there, and I may have said too much, and I know there's other questions that folks have.
Hi, my name is Harold Rhodes. Folks here have heard the question. I'm a proud father. Our daughter graduated in 2006 and got her master's degree from Columbia, and we obviously take great pride in Milford High School. And it's been pointed out to me by principal and by Dr. McIntyre previously that we've had other good students currently who've gone on to fine colleges and have done very, very well. And obviously we take pride in those. But just for some background, Hopedale High gets a level rating of a 1. Medway High gets a level rating of a 1. Mm-hmm. Blackstone Valley gets a level rating of a 1. Mm-hmm. Tri-County gets a level rating of a 1. Framingham gets a level rating of a 2. Mm-hmm. It breaks my heart that our school system, that Milford High School, has fallen to a level 3. it just breaks my heart that this is where we are today. Now, like I said, the principal and the superintendent are straight to point out that we've had good students take high-quality calculus classes and have gone on to, fine Ivy League schools. But that's not the point to me. The point to me are the bottom 25%. Now, the principal has said, well, we keep these folks in-house. And if I understand from what the principal is saying, that because we keep these students in-house, that's why we're a level 3. I don't know. My question to you is, how long will it take for Milford to return to its glory of being a level 1 school?
How long will it take? I think under the best circumstances, 3 to 5 years.
Hi. How do you support your faculty and staff on a daily basis and throughout the year in terms of morale, faculty morale, and support inside and outside the classroom?
So teachers will not be supported if they do not see their principal seeing them work, right? So I think first and foremost, you need to be present with your teachers when they are working with students. You need to be in their class. You need to be observing them. And you need to, I think you need to offer sort of affirmations and compliments when they're well earned. And I think that our teachers have extraordinarily difficult jobs that are getting more difficult every year. They're not going to get easier. It's only going to get harder. And I think that they, like all of us, they need encouragement and affirmation. And they need to be recognized when they're doing a good job. You can't recognize them for doing a good job if you're not seeing them do a good job. So I think that's number one. I think those recognitions can come in a lot of different ways. I think it can be in the thoughtful handwritten note in the mailbox. I think it can be swinging by the classroom after school to praise the teacher for what it is that you saw, that you admired and respected. I think one of the ways that we support our teachers and make them feel supported is by also sort of tending to their professional growth, right? And that means trying to figure out how to do more with less. Budgets for professional development are tight, if not non-existent. And if we're going to tell our teachers we support them, but tell them that we can't find a way for them to go and enhance their content knowledge or their pedagogical knowledge, I think they're going to feel a mismatch between our words and our actions. So I think that we need to work hard to find ways that we can support the professional growth of our teachers. And I think the last thing that I'll say to it is that in the day-to-day life of educators, with all of the pressures and challenges and demands, I think sometimes folks feel real discouraged. And I think it is part of I think a principal does play something of a pastoral role for the faculty. And I think the principal needs to inspire and encourage and nurture and sustain. And in most schools, the whole faculty comes together once a month. And if that is the principal's sole opportunity to be face-to-face with the entire team, and I think there needs to be a deliberate effort to inspire and encourage once a month. Our teachers, I think they need that. And I think they crave it.
I'd like to just follow up on that just a little bit. You having gone to high school here, and there are teachers that have been here a long time, how do you feel you'll be able to carry on that role on those teachers that were once your educator, and if someone said, well, when I taught you, this is how we did it?
Yeah.
You know, that's going to be, I see that as a difficult situation. How do you see that, your role in that?
Yeah, I understand why you would anticipate that as a challenge. I'm going to try to assure you that I see it differently. So, for a couple reasons. You know, I left here 20 years ago. And while there are some people who are still here, that when I left 20 years ago, I have not been part of this school community in 20 years. Right? I was a young adult then, and you know, I'm a little different now. So my relationships with these folks are, they're not really relationships, to be honest with you. These are people who knew me as a young adult, and now I'm perhaps going to reappear in their life, you know, 21 years later. And I think part of what prepared me for what I think, in fact, could be a challenge, I don't discount what you're talking about, is I think what was more challenging was in Hudson when I made the transition from a classroom teacher to being an assistant principal. Because I went from being a colleague to a supervisor for folks who had been my mentors and friends, right, in a profession, as an adult, over an 8-year period, right? So the relationships I had with these people were of a fundamentally different nature than the relationships I have with some of these adults that were here 20 years ago at Milford High School. And there were challenges. There still are challenges, no doubt, but challenges that I feel that I've risen to. And as I've sort of grown older and more mature, you know, I've come to find great confidence and solace in the idea that this is about the students. This isn't about you and me. This isn't about our relationship. And I would prefer that you like me, and I would prefer that, you know, we have a friendly relationship. But that's not why I'm working here. I'm working here to make the school the best possible place it can be for the students. And I think that's my anchor, you know. And yeah, are there times where we have challenging conversations with one another as colleagues? Absolutely. But, you know, I don't shy away from those for a second because you expect nothing less. You expect the principal to be the first to initiate the challenging conversation where it needs to happen, and rightfully so. You know, that's what I expect for the people who work in the schools where my children attend, and you have a right to expect that from the next principal here.
How important is it to you that Milford be a level 1 school?
Yeah, so it's very important. And the reason why is because Milford is operating in a highly competitive school choice economy. So there are significant numbers of Milford families that are choosing to be consumers in the school choice marketplace. And they are choosing the communities that Mr. Rhodes, is it? Yes. Mentioned earlier. Hopedale, Nipmuc, Medway, and Holliston. These are the 4 towns where you're losing the most families to, right? And they're all level 1. I will tell you as an educator that I do not put a great deal of stock in this accountability system that the state has. I'll tell you why in a moment. As an educator, as an administrator, I recognize that families see this like consumer reports, right? So, you know, maybe I could try to convince them that this level rating isn't all it's cracked up to be, but you know what? I'm not going to convince a lot of people it's not all it's cracked up to be. They're going to see this as the last word on school quality. So for Milford to reach a point where it is having a positive revenue flow from choice, where people from surrounding communities are choosing to come to Milford, I don't see how you get from where you are now to that destination until Milford's a level 1 school. Right? Once you get there, I think that there is good reason to think that Milford can be a positive recipient on school choice. You have advantages of scale over Nipmuc and Hopedale to offer a breadth of programs that they can never touch. Right? You've already got some real magnets here that are drawing people, and I've heard today that your music program is already drawing in choice students. Right? Some of the work that you're doing around AP and post-secondary education readiness, Milford's punching way above its weight, and it doesn't get accounted for in the level ratings. Okay? But this is all the foundation right? You've got a good athletic program here that's getting better. You've got robust extracurricular offerings. Like, this can be a school of choice in the region, absolutely. But you're going to need to hit level 1 status before people are going to look at you seriously. And I don't like it, but that's how it is. So that's why I care. That's why it's very important, right? Now, since you're here and you care about education, I want to speak for just a brief moment longer about why, as an educator, I think you got to take these level ratings with a grain of salt. If you are willing to, if you're willing to give me 8 minutes of your time, okay, you can go to my Twitter handle. It is at JCOutland. So it's at JCOTLIN. And if you go to my Twitter handle, you will see a link to a video on YouTube. It's an 8-minute presentation that I've put together where I've analyzed a bunch of data for Milford High School in what I hope is an accessible conversation about sort of level ratings in our system of accountability here in the Commonwealth, and how it obscures and confuses, regrettably. It doesn't change my bottom line conclusion. Level status matters, because we operate in a competitive school choice environment, and for most consumers, they see this as the beginning and end of the discussion about school quality. But I ask you, as people who you clearly care about education, you're here, right? Even if you don't think I should be the next principal, I still hope you might spend 8 minutes learning a little bit more about Milford's data and hearing one perspective on accountability here in the state.
I saw in your bio that you're in the middle of a doctorate program or beginning.
Beginning.
Can you speak a little bit more about that, and congratulations for continuing
Thank you.
education?
Thank you. Well, so the principal is the principal teacher, right? And so the first teacher, right? And so you have to be all in on learning, right? And this is the next step for me in my learning, is to pursue a doctorate. The further I have advanced in my career and in my education, the more aware I have become of how little I know and how much I have to learn, and how essential it is that I push myself to continue my education. I hope that by doing so, I can be a model as the first teacher for others in the profession. And as someone who just has so much learning, that learning will never end, for me to help a school become its best, I need to do everything I can to become my best, right? And so that's why I'm in a doctoral program right now. And yeah, it's been a great start. Frankly, the doctoral program has really confirmed for me that it was time to seek the transition from being an assistant principal to a principal. It has energized me and got me excited about leadership as a principal that wasn't there prior to starting the program.
So it's back on you say Milford is a level 3. How do you see yourself marketing Milford as probably better than the other schools that have been mentioned as level 1 because of the state rating? I mean, I see it as, okay, you see the hole-in-the-wall restaurant and it doesn't look great from the outside, and it has by far the best food you've ever had. Yeah. How do you market that to the communities? Yeah. Within the guise of the state's stupid rating system?
Yeah, so one, I want to acknowledge that I'm not deeply knowledgeable about what efforts are already underway in Milford, so I may be presumptuous in making some suggestions for things that in fact are already happening, so forgive me if I do. Yeah, so one thing that we used to do in Hudson and we've stopped, and I think frankly we need to continue, is there was a time where we published 3 or 4 times annually a publication called Hudson Highlights, where we showcased our best. And we sent it out to every residential address in Hudson, not just school families, every residential address in Hudson. And I think that is, it's a significant investment of resources, right? Both the cost of the project, but the time that you need to invest in making it happen. But I think that you need to try to speak directly to an audience outside of just the school community. And I think that helps. It helps stimulate conversation in the community about what's going on in the school, and it helps makes things visible to people that are not visible. So I'll give you a quick example of a few things that I've learned about this school today beyond what I've already told you, that I didn't know before. And I tried really hard to do my homework on this school before I came in for my interviews, and I learned about a lot of great stuff happening. And I learned about a whole bunch more today that I couldn't find out by doing my homework. So this says to me, hey, there's more things to shine the light on here, right? So let me just mention just a couple really, really quickly. I want to, I am going to reiterate a couple that I said earlier. Okay, I didn't know that people were coming here for music. That is phenomenal, right? I didn't know that students were taking AP courses in 9th grade. I didn't know that students were topping off on BC Calc in junior year, right? And I did a lot of homework. I couldn't learn any of those things. I didn't know about the Best Buddies program you have here at this school. The scale that operates on is such a credit to this school community. It says so much about the values that the educators and the students hold here. And I know it is on a banner in the front, right? But as someone who lives right here and who's done my homework, I didn't know that until I got to this school. And that's something to proclaim from the tops of the mountains, Look, I didn't get into education to help school achieve a level 1 status. I got into education because I want to help young adults develop into socially responsible citizens, right? And so this is the kind of stuff that pumps me up, right, when I hear about this. The other thing that that I've learned about, and I learned some of this doing my homework, but I learned a lot more of it in my sort of time with the faculty and the administration today, and with the students as well, is that Milford is really, I think, a regional leader and perhaps a state and national leader in simultaneously pursuing advances in college readiness and career readiness for students. I think many of you know that, under Principal Banach, Milford's become a Chapter 74 school with the Hospitality and Tourism Management program, that this is getting scaled out to banking in the future. You're not going to find other high schools doing this right now. And I think you're going to find in the coming years more and more high schools doing this, because as someone who works in another high school, we're all saying, yeah, we got to get on that right now. And I see a lot of opportunity for growth there as well. But I think those are some of the things that need to be highlighted. Again, I think, I think a newsletter that gets out to everyone in the community and that shows up on the front step may be one very effective tool for doing so. There's more I could talk about, but I want to be respectful of your time, and I know we're coming up on the end. Yeah.
One more. Maddie, you're going to close it out for us.
So completely aside from test scores and college acceptance and school choice, how would you measure, aside from all of the usual what makes a school good, how would you measure the success of Milford High School?
Mm-hmm. Well, so I would say to you that some of the measures that we typically look to are pointing us in the right direction, but we need to get out a little bit further than those measures right now. And then there's some other things that typically are not measured that I think speak more directly to your question. So let me start with the stuff that I think we got to go a little bit further than we are right now. In the age of digital communications and social media, I think it is easier than easier for us than it ever has been to follow up with our graduates after they graduate and find out what are your true post-secondary outcomes. So we made big gains in the Commonwealth in the past sort of few years when the Commonwealth bought into the National Student Clearinghouse, and it lets us know about what a vast majority of our college-going graduates end up with in terms of degrees. But we don't know what they go on to do in terms of their vocations. We don't know about their level of civic engagement after sort of college and high school. And I think that it's not beyond us to start to probe that a bit, because again, those are the ultimate measures of our success. When our graduates go on to become civically engaged professionals, right? People who are contributing positively to their community, then we can say, all right, we're doing a good job, right? But it's hard for us to find out if that's in fact what they're doing. So there are some things that I think we can look to in high school to see if we're moving towards that long term. And this is some of the other measures that you're speaking of. I think we need to look at participation rates in the extracurricular programs here at school. And I think we need to look at ways to boost participation amongst student communities that are not engaged. The students who have the most rewarding experiences in high school are students who are deeply engaged in both the curricular and extracurricular offerings. So when we have students who are not engaging in those extracurricular offerings, I think we need to try to find out why and try to get them engaged. And I think that if gradually over time, I think if we are increasing participation, especially amongst non-participant communities in the extracurricular program, I think that's a really positive and important thing for us to do here at school. I'd be especially keen on participation in certain types of activities, right? So Milford has a pretty impressive array of service-oriented clubs here at school. And I'd say a hallmark of success would be to see increasing participation in those service organizations over time. And then I'd say another sort of measure that you need to sort of look at, and this is hard for us to look at, is how is the wellness of our students doing? And compared to what? So Principal Benock, has Milford been participating in the Metro West Adolescent Health Survey? Yeah. So this has become a valuable tool for schools in the regions to try to gain some insight into the wellness of their student bodies and to try to have some comparative data by which to sort of assess where they're at. And that's important. It wasn't that long ago that I don't think schools were ever asked to really attend to the wellness of their students, but we sure are now. And students are not going to achieve academically unless they're well. So I think that that's another measure that we need to really focus on because it is foundational for success here in school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I thank all of our parents and students and community members for joining us this evening. Thank you for all your time and your great questions. Have a nice evening.
Okay. Thank you, folks.